I don't feel guilt that I don't go anymore, and I'll get into it if you're interested. But
I always want to get into guilt.
Okay,
it's my favorite topic.
Oh, good.
Explosion.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Buds with Suds. I'm Richard Zombek, and I'm here with Steve Lesnikoski.
Again,
as some of you...
I don't know why I keep showing up, but I keep doing it.
As some of you may have guessed, I'm fighting off a little bit of a cold, so I either sound very annoying or very, very sexy. I did an interview for this episode with Michelle Simons, whose name right out of the gate I get wrong.
And I'm glad that she corrected you on that.
I am
that
too.
Was like, as soon as she corrected you, I was like, all right, I can get behind this.
Yeah,
I listen.
That was good. She works for a nonprofit in Lynn. She's an addictions counselor. She's actually got a lot of titles. She's an addictions counselor. She teaches recovery coaching at North Shore Community College. She also does a class on DUI and is an avid meditator and has been sober for a long time, a lot longer than me. We spoke a little bit about her professional background in this interview, but she was kind of really anxious to get to the meditation part, so the majority of that interview is about meditation. So we'll get to that in a minute. I just first want to mention that don't forget to visit us at www.budswithsuds.com. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, get to the iTunes podcast. And if you are listening on iTunes, don't forget to rate us and leave a comment, hopefully 5 stars. That would be nice. And as our usual disclaimer, I want to mention that none of the opinions mentioned or none of the opinions expressed in this podcast are the opinions of the organizations for which we work or companies for which we work or organizations and companies for which our guests work. So without further ado, here is the interview with Michelle Simons. All right. Michelle Simmons.
Yes, Simons.
Really?
Yeah.
I've been calling you Simmons this entire time.
Wow, and I never corrected you.
No, you haven't.
Okay.
So I want to look at, you do a lot. You teach at North Shore Community College.
Yep.
You do a DUI class.
Yes.
You do one-on-one counseling.
Yep.
You have Prevention Works. Is that a website or just a Facebook page?
It's just a Facebook page. It's under the City of Lynn. It's actually a grant for prescription drug prevention.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's a prevention program in terms of resources for teens and parents. Mainly at this point, our target group is adults because teens usually aren't on our Facebook page, of course.
Right.
So we're just about the dangers of prescription drugs. The sort of perceived risk is really low with prescription drugs compared to street drugs. So we're trying to sort of help people understand that.
You're basically saying if it has a prescription on it, then people think I'm taking it as the doctor prescribed, and
right.
So it's not dangerous.
Right.
And we're seeing that like an elevated spike in particularly benzos right now, right?
Yeah, benzos. The edible marijuana is kind of going around the schools. Stimulants, Adderall, Ritalin, things like that. So, yeah.
And the college scene too. Mm-hmm. Stay up and study.
Definitely, absolutely.
Right? And nurses.
Yep.
Doctors.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's safe.
Yeah.
It's a prescription.
Exactly.
It's not crystal meth.
I'm taking it as it's not crystal meth, but it's still
meth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's like like Ritalin.
Yeah.
Right. I'm giving my kid meth.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So and you also do a lot around meditation.
Yeah.
What's the Facebook page on that?
So that we have a Meditation Online Massachusetts, which is like a group page that just got started. So we're just kind of experimenting right now with Facebook Live meditations, and that's strictly for new people who've never tried Sahaja Yoga meditation in the past.
Let's get into that a little
Sure.
later.
Yeah.
I want to talk more about your professional career. So you're a counselor on the North Shore.
Yep.
What's your official title?
So I'm a clinician here at an agency on the North Shore. We do one-on-one counseling, mainly with addictions. So the license I have, I got a master's degree, and the license I have is a LADC, which is a Massachusetts drug and alcohol counseling license.
Okay.
So that's something I can use within an agency or independently. So that I do here at an office. And then I also run the DUI group. So they're first offender DUIs.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you something about that
Sure.
too. So do you find, it wasn't the case for me,
Yeah.
right? But do you find that when people are, if they're stopped with a DUI, I guess I'm going to ask a stupid question. How many times is that the end of it?
I'd say there's like 2 out of every first offender group. So they have to come here for 16 weeks. And within that 16 weeks, there's 1 or 2 that tend to reoffend throughout with a group of, let's say, 20.
While they're in the class?
While they're in the class.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say that it's one of the most interesting groups I've ever run. And actually, I think you only really need a bachelor's level or something to run it. So but I continue to do it because I actually enjoy it so much, because we're so used to dealing with people with some real heavy addictions here that this is pretty light. You get your kind of blue-collar workers. You do get a couple of people that are in recovery or, that definitely sort of came to the understanding that they probably have a problem with alcohol. But in general, you just get your general public. And so we get such a diverse group of people that it makes the group really entertaining and fun to do.
So like the alcoholics come from Yale and jail, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Park Place and Park
right.
Bench.
Right, you're all over the map. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So what does that involve then?
Well,
16. So it's one. Is it 1 day a week? 16 for 16 weeks, or
yes.
is it okay? So it's not intensive. It's not like they're coming 5 days a week.
No,
an IOP or something.
Nothing like that. No.
Okay.
So it's 1 night a week or day. We have one morning class too. They run about an hour and 45 minutes. And they are required to do 2 AA or NA meetings or some type of self-help or mutual aid type meeting. But yeah, so actually I've incorporated the meditation a lot within that group. What I noticed is because you're working with the general public, you have this group that's like starving for some sort of spirituality or a place to talk.
Yeah.
And usually I'll do the initial intake and they'll say something like, oh, I don't have to say anything in group, do I? Or I'm not expected to share. And I'm like, absolutely not. I don't call anybody out or make anybody do anything. But usually after the 4th or 5th week, people start to loosen up and start talking. And it's so interesting to watch because that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. I have the same thing. I started a group at the hospital.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole idea was, my boss was like, well, you're going to need a format. And I don't have a format.
Same.
Right? It's just you come in and let's see what comes up.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of conversation around meditation and stuff like that, and your thoughts and how you think and feel and all that stuff.
Right.
And I have people all the time. I'm not a group person.
Yep.
And I'm just come. You don't have to say anything.
Yep.
You don't have to say a word. And I can't tell you how many people have come in that said, I don't talk. Take up an entire half hour
Yep.
of an hour group, right? Talking about whatever.
Yep.
And you're absolutely right about that spiritual component of it.
Yeah.
Right. So real quick, just back to the DUI.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all first time offenders,
mm-hmm.
right? And so what's the goal? I know most of them are court ordered.
Yeah.
Right. But why? Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
so DAE is the title of the group, Drug and Alcohol, or Driver Alcohol Education. So we sort of have a list of topics that we're supposed to cover, and I don't use a script.
According to who?
According to the Department of Public Health,
okay.
The court system, what they expect us to sort of cover in these groups.
Right. So one more punitive measure against sick people.
Which is funny because through my head lately, I go back and forth with this court-ordered sort of forced treatment thing. And I hate to force treatment on anybody. especially people come in and need an assessment. I'm kind of taking a left here. But then again, like with these DUI groups, you see people really get a lot out of it. And I have had so many, and this has nothing to do with me, but I think due to the fact that like they have a group of people that they started to open up and talk to, and they'll finish the 16 weeks and say like, well, I dread having to come every week, but I've actually enjoyed the group,
right?
And I tell them I do too.
And I know that's a big sobriety humility thing to say it has nothing to do with me, but it actually does. It actually does.
Bit,
I mean, you're facilitating the group, right? It's like I can't tell you how many AA meetings I've been to that, depending on the person that's chairing, right, it's going to be a really good group.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Because it's not,
Because they set the tone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's stop saying it's not.
Yeah.
The one thing I can't stand is people that say we're saving lives.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't think we are.
No, we're not.
Right? And anyone who thinks that, I think you're full of yourself.
Yep.
Are we helping people? Are we pointing them in the right direction? That's a whole different story probably.
Yep.
But the fact is that, from my understanding and from how you're explaining it, you've got these people that come in that were court ordered.
Yep.
And they end up actually getting something, a little more something out of it than they thought they would. Right. That they take with them in the world. Right. Now, whether or not that keeps them from getting in a car again, as you said, you've had.
Yeah,
they reoffend.
They may enjoy the group, but still reoffend.
while they're in the group, right?
Exactly.
And that really all we're doing is planting seeds, right? Yeah. It's just like one little thing at a time, and you're going boink, 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 boink.
Honestly, my whole motivation is to just give them some sort of hope that there's some decency in the world, that life can be enjoyed, right? And we can enjoy each other, right? So that's like my whole probably motivation when I run these groups. So I just want...
Wow, so you're really just a hippie.
Pretty much, yeah.
I mean, you're insane if you think like that. I know.
But it's true, and that's how I feel about life, right? So
I do too. I mean, I had a real problem, particularly when I first got sober, with because I went into AA, right? I think I went to Addison Gilbert, and I did the outpatient, the PHP, right? What is that? Partial hospitalization, blah, blah, blah. And I went up there, and then I think they get out at like 2:30 or 3 o'clock, and then I would drive from there to Marblehead and go to a meeting, and I would sit in the corner, and I would just go, because I had to, right? And would hear everything about God and, spirituality, and it's the threefold disease, and someone would describe the disease, and I would want to shoot myself. And then lately, I came across some of Sam Harris's stuff, and that definition of spirituality, right? That spirituality, for me, this is for me, is the ability to feel okay in the present moment, regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, what else?
Beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
And my entire drinking career started with, I just want to feel okay. Right? So passing that on, right? I don't know if you've ever heard Sandy B. He's an AA speaker.
Only because I heard your podcast and I listened to it. And then I played a little yesterday.
Good. See,
so you've had some influence.
Planting seeds, right?
Yeah.
And I can't remember where I was going with this. But when he talks about it, it's this idea of we just want to be okay, right? And it's just it's that ability to get there and why we drank, and then why do you continue to go to meetings? I get that from my mother all the time. Right? It's like, oh, you're still going to these things? It's like, because I'm really excited about what I got, and I want other people to get it. That's where I was going with it. See, I knew it would
that's
take me
what
a
he
while.
said. You know what? That's really interesting that he said that, because I have a little twist to my own experience lately in the last few years since meditation with my meeting attendance or my lack of. And I listened to that too about, why still go. And I don't feel guilt that I don't go anymore, and I'll get into it if you're interested, but...
I always want to get into guilt.
Okay.
It's my favorite topic.
Oh, good. Yeah, so I, like with the meditation, the meditation that we do is free, and I've been like just blown away with the experience that I've had doing this in the last 4 years, and we give it away constantly, right? So we run free meditation groups around everywhere, and that's kind of replaced that has replaced, I guess, and taken me to a whole new direction. But
so the guilt is where? The guilt is not going to meetings anymore?
no, I think you know what happens. I was one of those jerks. I was, when I worked in residential treatment years ago, they called me the meeting Nazi, and I was up until probably like 4 years ago when I started seeking something more and I didn't think I was looking beyond meetings or looking to sort of exit meetings. I was looking to grow further spiritually, and I wasn't finding that in the meetings where I had initially for the first almost 15 years of recovery.
You were pushing clients into meeting or
constantly.
People
if you don't go, or the people that stop and start going to church or something, I'm like, oh, there you go. There's another one.
They're going to drink again.
Done.
Yeah, no,
you would have hated me.
They don't have God in their life.
Yeah,
they're screwed.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I get, and I think I'm getting pretty close to having that same nickname.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's. I had to take a real look at that too, and I did about a month ago, right? Because I kept telling people, it's like, go to meetings. There's like a ton of meetings on the North Shore.
Yep.
Like you can't spit at any hour of the day without hitting a meeting on the North Shore.
Yeah.
I think there are actually more meetings of AA per capita on the North Shore
in Marblehead
than anywhere else in the country, right? And so. But I would get a lot of eye rolls.
Yeah.
I've been to meetings, and I would hate that, right? Well, then you're not going to the right ones.
Right.
And I started becoming that same thing, right? That same go.
Yep.
And this happened about a month ago. I was on my own somewhere. I was sitting somewhere, and it occurred to me how unfair that was of me, right? Because I think I said it in when Steve interviewed me, that my AA, or what I got out of AA, was not traditional mainstream. I'm doing air quotes for everyone listening.
He's doing air quotes.
mainstream AA.
Yeah.
That is, big book steps. You got to believe in God. Blah blah blah. I found like little fringy, off the beaten path groups that basically people in mainstream AA told me not to go to, which is exactly why I went. Right.
Sure.
And I got a lot out of it.
Yep.
So I did kind of apologize to the group.
Yeah.
And said, I shouldn't be pushing you into AA. I got lucky. I found. Yeah. But what I think is important, I think there are two things important that I'd like to touch on, at least for this conversation.
Yep.
Is one, the communication and finding like-minded people and people who are struggling like you.
Yeah.
And if you go to an AA meeting or to an NA meeting or to any kind of 12-step thing, compared to going to a coffee shop to find those people, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, right? You're going to find at least one person at one of those meetings that thinks and feels like you do.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And the other thing is, going back to our previous conversation, is what Sandy B said, is it's not that I'm not learning anything, right? I still get something out of a meeting.
Yeah.
But also I've learned to discern what I don't want.
Yep.
Right? And I can look around the room and I can go, oh, that guy's got 30 years, but he sounds like a total clown.
Yep.
And I don't want to be like that.
Absolutely.
At 30 years sober, right?
Yep.
But I can kind of pick and go, I like what that guy has to say.
Yeah.
Right? And because of what I've gotten and where I am in my sobriety, I'm excited about it. So I want other people to get that.
Absolutely.
Right? And that's what Sandy B talks about.
Yeah.
Right? Is I go back because I want other people to feel this way.
Right.
Right? And that goes back into meditation.
Yep.
Right? Is that, and I've talked about this at I did a couple Schwartz rounds. And again, this is an interview about you, so I'm going to...
No, but talk more about yourself. That's great.
Yeah, but enough about me. Let's talk about my new book. The compassion training, right? When you do loving kindness meditation, which makes me gag just to say it.
Yeah.
But when you do loving kindness meditation, which is cultivating compassion.
Just so you know, I am not a meditation expert. I've only practiced one, and it worked. So I think a lot of people assume I know all this other stuff, and I don't. Okay. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, but so let me
just to add that in.
Yeah. Well, so when you do compassion training, what you're doing is you're essentially cultivating compassion. And what compassion does is it creates joy.
Oh, I had no
right?
idea.
Yeah,
no,
it's
That's how that works.
But when you do, and this is the example I always give, when you open the door for someone, you get a little charge out of yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
It's a little pat on the back to yourself, and it generates joy.
You're like, I'm a good guy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what joy does is it motivates you to do more.
Yes.
Right? So
100%.
So when you feel good about what you're doing,
Yep.
you want other people to feel good too.
Yes.
It's just a natural cycle, right?
Yes.
And you start seeing
You
that.
want to share your joy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you become a real pain people, right? Because
Life's awesome, guys.
Yeah, exactly. You really need to try this because it
really
changed my
fun.
life, right? And they throw you out a window. And I'm doing the same thing now at work. I'm
Yeah.
like, I got 10% happier for my boss.
Yeah.
I got waking up by Sam Harris for the administrator.
And nobody
of the
reads
hospital.
any of it, I'm sure.
Nobody
right?
reads it.
No.
Well, actually, I had a couple
You got a
people tell me
taker?
that. Yeah, I had a
Good.
couple people tell me that they downloaded the app.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Okay.
So your experience with meditation.
Yeah. Oh, you want to hear it?
Yes.
Nice.
What do you think I was going to tell you about?
I don't
your
know. You were
experience?
gonna, maybe. So yeah. So can I tell you what led to it?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So I was attending 12-step meetings like a good AA, NA person should. Even up until coming up on 15 years clean, and experiencing anxiety for the first time. I mean, I probably had it in the past, but whatever. But really kind of upset about it because I did the traditional, I did the steps multiple times, always had a sponsor, always sponsored other people. And I don't minimize that work or what I got out of that by any means because I think that laid the foundation for getting me to the place of finding the meditation. But coming up to that point, and then and doing all the step work and sitting in meetings and being like, why am I feeling more anxious now than ever? I don't understand. And I just kept looking at the 12 steps on the wall, and I'm like, I've done all this. Like, what's going wrong? Like, what's wrong? What's the problem? And I started asking people that had more time than me, because that's what I've always done, and at that point, as you start getting more and more years, there are less and less people with more time and more experience than we have. So but the few people that I did know, I asked, and they told me things just got worse. And that, right. And it just gets worse. This is literally almost word for word one of the responses. Like, it just gets worse. I have phobias now. I can't drive over bridges. Panic attacks, anxiety attacks, all this kind of stuff. And these are people with 20 plus years, clean or sober, right? So I'm like, F that. Like, I'm not accepting it. And I was just like, I've got to figure this out. Something's wrong. And my whole foundation for recovery was all spirituality. Like, once the drugs were down, honestly, like, it's been a constant, like, I want to understand God. I believe in God. I want to know what God is. I want to know what spirituality is, and consistent prayer and no meditation though. Maybe I'd watch the clock.
You said you did the steps.
Yeah.
It says prayer and meditation.
Yeah, it does,
right
doesn't it?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody knows that.
Everyone ignores the meditation
Everybody
part.
ignores it.
Right.
So like I said, I'm sitting in meetings and I'm staring at the steps on the wall, and I'm like, what am I missing? And the meditation popped out, and I was like, oh my God, I've never done that. That's the missing piece. That's the one thing I didn't put my entire heart into. And so I started Google searching meditations, and because I needed some help, because I had sat at home a couple of times and tried to quiet my mind, and I had no idea what I was doing. I read
just for the people listening, sitting and I sat refers to meditation.
Yeah.
That's what meditators call meditation,
that's what
is
we
sitting.
do. We sit.
Yeah.
I'm sitting right now meditating with you. So I had no idea what I was doing, and it didn't make any sense what I was doing just by sitting there. So I went online and I searched, and I found a couple of different places, and they were charging big bucks. Like ridiculous money, and they told me I could be a member for life. And then I looked online; they were going to give me some mantra that was going to enlighten me.
Oh, you were looking at TM.
Yep.
Transcendental meditation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't go that route. No, but anyway, I was discouraged.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, you can't pay for this thing. Like, you don't have some right to God that I don't have, that I can somehow pay you and you're going to give to me.
But just to go back to your comment, don't go that route. A lot of people who have tried TM swear by it.
Yeah.
And granted, a lot of them have paid big bucks for their own special mantra.
For their own special mantra,
that they get from the guru.
Yep.
And they can go home with, and it revolutionizes their world.
Right.
Yeah, I have some issues with the financial aspect of that too.
Yeah.
But so continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just innately, like it just honestly, like it was disheartening, And I'm not a sensitive person, but like things that really mean stuff to me, like I was like, oh, that's really sad. Like so I literally went back and forth for probably like 2 weeks with this woman from this place in Beverly. And she just continuously tried to work out payment plans for me. And I just said, I find it so sad that only the financially elite folks can get their enlightenment.
It's like charging to look at a tree.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. Yeah. Thank you, yeah. So anyway, I found this group in Salem. I keep like hitting my knee, so that's probably going to come up on here.
Probably.
It's good. Yeah, I'll stop doing that. So I found this group in Salem, and
just so people don't think that we were smacking each other.
I wasn't smacking you. So this group in Salem was happening, and Sahaja Yoga meditations, what it's called. And this woman, a little younger than me, she was from India. She was teaching it. She was talking about the chakras. She had a little chakra chart up and talked about these 3 energy channels. And then we practiced meditation, and she guided us through probably a 10, 15-minute meditation. And she was asking us if we felt anything on our hands, because apparently what this meditation is, when this energy comes up, this Kundalini energy comes up, you feel the manifestation of it on your hands as a cool breeze. So I was sitting there, and I think I probably half fell asleep or something, and it felt nice. And for some reason, I really like dug her, like I trusted her, probably because it was like authentic. She was Indian. I was like, oh, cool, this has got to be the real deal, And so I was holding my hands, and I'm like, oh, I really want to feel something. So some other people said they did, and she actually walked around the room, and she just held her hand over mine like a few inches. And normally you would feel heat, probably, with somebody's body heat. And I literally felt like an air conditioning in between our 2 hands. And I was like, oh, my God, this is something. And I basically never stopped since. That was January, I think, of 2015. So, 4 years back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what is that? What does the meditation look like then?
Yeah, so the very first time if somebody's brand new, they've never done Sahaja Yoga before, we walk them through a process called self-realization. So there's some affirmations. We use our hand to sort of direct the... Sorry, I love myself. I'm worth it. No, it's nothing like that. It's pretty...
What was that, Al Franken, when he did...
oh, God.
What was that on Saturday Night Live?
Saturday Night Live, yeah. Stuart Smalley.
Stuart Smalley.
Look in the mirror and
exactly.
tell you how much you're worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think innately I already knew I was worth it. That's why I showed up to meditation in the first place.
Yeah.
But so there are different affirmations. We start off with just asking, who am I? With our right hand on our heart. So this is interesting, because like the second center that we go to is like around the stomach. We say things innately, like our gut instinct, right? So this is where our gut instinct comes from, on this left side here of our stomach, and that's where our inner teacher or our inner guru is, and that's the quality of that chakra, right? So we ask inside, am I my own teacher? And then down by the waist on the left-hand side is where all our emotions and our desires come up from. So we just ask, please give me the pure knowledge. Let me know the truth, right? That's all we really all want to know, right? It's like, who's keeping our heart beating every day? And then we work our way back up. When we're back up at our heart again, we just repeat, like, I am the pure spirit. So the truth is, we are the spirit, right? We're not this body. We're not this mind. We're not these thoughts, this ego, our past, all that sort of shell of illusion. We're none of that. We're the spirit, which is the same spirit that we were born with, is the same spirit I'm sitting here 46 years later across from you today with a bunch of junk, right, piled up, a lot of fog and dust getting in the way. So, then we actually say, I'm not guilty at all, because everybody holds all this guilt all the time. Probably 99% of the people in the world walk around with like a huge weight of guilt on their shoulders and behave a certain way because of it, right? We say, I forgive everybody, including myself, at the level of the forehead. So if you think about it, it's all really practical. Like, if I get angry with you, like my forehead like furls up, and like that's where we catch the anger. So this is where we ask for forgiveness. On the back of our head, we just ask, like, if there's anything I did against my spirit, please forgive me. And then at the top of the head, this is like the seventh energy center. So like babies have that soft spot on top of their head.
Yeah.
And as we grow up, like our egos and our superego kind of like form these two big balloons over this sort of like connection. So we're just trying to reopen this connection that we had when we were born. So we just ask, please give me my self-realization. And then we have people check. And there's literally a physical experience. You can feel a cool breeze over your head. You can feel the cool breeze on the... Yeah, we can do it. When we're done with this interview. Or right now, you can tell me whether you feel it. But yeah. And each of these energy centers are chakras. Chakra just means wheel in Sanskrit. You probably know that. The nerve endings are on our fingertips and on our feet and on the top of our head and different parts of our body. So you actually turn into a computer. Like, you can literally know what's going on with your subtle system by what's happening on your hands. So if I'm feeling, like cool breeze on both of my hands, and maybe both my pinkies might be like tingling, or there might be a little heat or something, that means there may be a little catch or a blockage at the level of my heart. So pinkies are the heart. And each finger has its own energy center. I won't get
so a lot like acupuncture, acupressure,
similar stuff.
Auricular therapy. That's all about the ears and the medians that go from the ears to the different parts. And
again, I never explored any of that other stuff.
Right. No,
but people have said, it sounds similar to.
Well, it's only similar in that it maps energies and functions and areas, right? So that they're like auricular therapy, there are points in your ear that are responsible or control or whatever you want to call it. Kind of the nerve endings
to something.
To different areas. So if you're having liver problems, you want to do the auricular therapy on this. Same thing with acupuncture and what's the foot one? There's
the reflexology. Maybe? Yeah.
And all of those are medians mapped to, which, if you think about it, right? I mean,
all comes from the same place.
Well, we have like millions of miles of nerve endings in us, right? So
absolutely.
They've got to be there for something, right? And
I guess the difference between some of it and the other is, like the connection, right? So we can know all this stuff mentally, but do we have the connection? And that's the difference. That's where the cool breeze comes in, which is sort of the validation of that connection. You're touching your sahasrara right now.
It itches.
That's the top of the head where it comes out.
I had an itch. It was a cool breeze.
Did you feel that?
So during how long are these meditations?
Well, we do the Salem class that we do. It's like an hour and 15 minutes, but we just do we do a little talk in the beginning, maybe about 10 minutes, just explaining the chakras and different stuff if there's somebody new that comes.
So what about you? Do you meditate on a daily basis?
Absolutely,
And how long do you sit for?
It depends. Like in the morning, probably anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes on a good day. Well, I wouldn't say on a good day, just depending.
And what do you do during that? Mm-hmm. Like, what does sitting involve for you?
So the morning meditations are more just about being silent. That's the early morning is the best time to meditate. Like, as I'm sure, like a lot of practices talk about this. I think, like when the sun's coming up, birds are waking up. Like,
I don't get up that early.
You don't get up that early.
No,
I'm sorry.
Absolutely not.
That's the best time of the day.
No, it's not.
You haven't found that joy yet?
No, I haven't. Well, I asked because what I've been primarily involved in and looking at is mindful meditation, right?
Yeah.
Buddhist meditation.
Sure.
Which is basically just sitting, paying attention to your breath.
Yep.
Right, watching what comes up, returning to the breath.
Yep.
And just doing that, basically beginning again.
Yeah.
Right? Is that the same thing we're talking about?
No.
Okay. Well, that's why I asked.
Right. Yeah. So the morning meditations with Sahaja Yoga, I mean, it's really, most of the time let's just say in general meditations, like we sit, we raise our kundalini, which is a little motion that we do that you can't see because I'm talking. And
she was waving her hands in front of her face.
I was standing on my head.
Doing some weird hokey thing.
It was really cool. Yeah. But anyway, so we do. You raise this energy, and then you kind of sit. And if I notice any catches on a particular finger, or maybe one side's more than the other, so our left side's our emotional channel, and our female side, our right side's our male side, and our more physical. So a lot of times, one side's more than the other. Like one side might be more sensitive and clearer than the other side. I tend to be more right-sided. I tend to be, let's say, if I go off balance, I tend to be more dominant. I'll, anger a little easier. I'm definitely physically active, like all that stuff. Versus if I go off balance, I would never get depressed. Never say never, but I don't tend to ever go in that direction, right? So my left side's a lot stronger or a lot more clear than my right. So I'll feel like, okay, my right side's kind of heated up. We have different ways of cooling it down. So you'll kind of put yourself in a balance and then sit and watching the thoughts, of course, and just sort of being a witness to the thoughts. Obviously they're going to come, but then there's those little gaps in between the thought where you get that sort of thoughtless awareness state, which is meditation, right? Is the thoughtlessness.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much, the morning. And it's not about sitting for hours and hours. It's obviously the quality of the meditation versus the quantity. I mean, I could sit there for 3 hours and I could replay the entire week in my head or go into my futuristic planning and.
Yeah, because when I started meditating, I would do, maybe 5-minute meditations, maybe 10-minute meditations. Now I'm up to about 20 to 30 minutes a day, depending on, and I'll switch it up too. It's like I've done some guided meditation.
Yep.
I picked up, I went through Dan Harris's 10% Happier stuff. I find that to be interesting only because he's got a lot of different disciplines on there from different teachers. Yeah. And then recently I picked up Sam Harris's, who's a neuroscientist.
Okay.
The app is called Waking Up. His book is called Waking Up. His podcast is called Waking Up. Yeah. And what I like about both these guys is that they're skeptics. Yeah. Right? In fact, Dan Harris.
You should be, right?
Yeah. Dan Harris wrote one called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. Yeah. Which I really liked,
That's
right?
Good, yeah.
And it's the explanation of what is this about?
Yeah.
Right? Actually, one of the podcasts that I talked about in my group last night was the power of negative thinking. Yeah. Right? Because this whole idea that you can change your thoughts and that you're somehow responsible for them, right? Which I find interesting with you and your position, right? Is you're a counselor, you're clinically trained, right? And we do this whole thing with CBT and affirmations and changing your thinking.
I don't do any of that stuff, by the way.
Well,
no, I really
no, and I'm glad to hear that because my argument is always and I'll use you as a sounding board just for the sake of this argument is you're a clinician. You're in a position of power. At least me as a patient thinks you are. Yep. Right? Yep. I'm newly sober. Yeah. I have I'm constitutionally incapable of having a positive thought. Right? And that's true for me. Yeah. Right? Everything that happens in my life, my immediate reaction is this is not going to end well. Right?
Still?
Yeah. But I know what it is today. Yeah. Right? I'm a much more positive person than I ever was.
Yep. Right. So progress.
But if I'm talking to you as a clinician and you go, well, you need to turn that around. And here's some exercises for you to think more positive. Right? I'm immediately put in a position where I'm going to fail. And I'm being judged by a clinician who I've put in a position of power. Yeah. And so what's the point? Right. Right? And what I learned early on was you have negative thinking. Yeah. So what? Yep. Who cares? Yeah. Right? You don't have to listen to it. Yeah. Right? And Sam Harris has this description that he says is basically thoughts are coming at us like fastballs every day and there are thousands of them. Yep. And we're standing in the strike zone. right? And
Yep.
the idea of meditation is to be able to step out of the strike
Step
zone
aside. Good.
and watch those fastballs go
Yeah,
by.
yeah.
Right? That now the thoughts they're under me,
Yeah.
right? They're not on the surface anymore, right? So I still have those thoughts, but I'm not owned by them.
Yep.
They're still there, right? Whereas before I would catastrophize everything.
Right.
Right, my boss wants to see me. Oh, I'm going to get fired.
screwed, yeah.
And within 30 seconds,
Yeah.
it would be me living under a bridge, eating out of a dumpster. Right? I mean, that's where it went.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And now I go, oh, I wonder what she wants.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, nice. It might be a fun conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you know, just like
Yeah.
me and Steve doing this podcast.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, gee, I've done this before.
Yeah.
It wasn't that great.
Yeah.
We did an hour a day with this other guy. We
Yeah.
got like no listeners. And then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, let's just try it.
Yeah. And so
Right?
what if nobody listens?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
having fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Me too.
You know, we have a good time. Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. It was a little touch and go there in the beginning.
Well, you have me talking about prevention.
It's not what you wanted to talk
No.
about, is it? Yeah, exactly. I know, but I wanted to get
Cut
to
that
that.
out.
I wanted to get that. I'll cross it out
Yeah.
right here. I'm still not going to cut it out, but
It's just there's still a job I don't quite understand yet, but yeah.
yeah. Well, and going back to the whole, counselor, therapist, clinical stuff, right?
Yeah.
Is that is the model, right? It's been the model since the 70s. It's like, okay, we have all these addicts and alcoholics.
Yep.
We need to treat them. We're going to create this job and this license, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yep.
And what gets me is it hasn't worked.
No. So
Right?
the only reason I got this degree, right? I just got this degree in 2016. This wasn't anything like But the only reason I did it was to kind of get somewhere in the field and be able to sort of do what I know how to do.
Right.
I can almost honestly say like I'm $84,000 in debt now, and I still counsel the same way I did before I had any letters or degrees.
Yeah.
Because it's from the heart. I'm sure that because I've grown on my own and, constantly introspecting, constantly looking at myself, constantly, and not in a way of beating myself up by any means, but just wanting to grow,
Right.
that my confidence is better and my conviction in terms of like, do I think you can like grow and permanently heal is like, yes, 110%. So that, I've gotten better, but I don't think that had to do with school. I had fun in school. I met a ton of people. I had some great professors that I enjoyed. I had an internship that really taught me how to run groups better and gave me more confidence, but I'm still the same, so-called counselor or whatever I was before, direct care case manager. I'm doing the same stuff, having conversations with people. And, like you said, that power dynamic that happens in this, like, actually today I did an intake with a guy that was court-ordered to come here and do the substance use assessment, to see if if he needed treatment. And we go through this thing, and, he really didn't feel like he had an alcohol problem. Neither did I. And even if I did, who cares? Because it has nothing to do with whether I think you do or not. If you feel like something's going on and you want some help, great. And if you don't, great. And we got to the end, and I said, I don't want to force you to do anything. And he said, yeah, I don't think any of this stuff's going to work. I went to AA before, and I didn't like it, and I'm staying sober on my own, and I don't think counseling is going to help me. I don't think I need it. I'm a pretty happy guy. I have a good job, this kind of thing. So I said, well, are you interested in just doing a little research on, alcoholism and what's problem drinking versus alcoholism and writing a little paper on it? And he said, yeah. He's like, I'd like to do that. He's like, I probably should know more about that. And I was like, cool, why don't we do that? Send it to me in an email in a couple of weeks, and we'll call it a day. And he was like, okay. So, then my whole point is because he looked across from me and he said, well, what are we going to do? You're the expert. And I said, I'm not the expert of anybody.
Exactly.
Like, absolutely.
I had that exact same conversation with my boss because we were asked to go talk to a group of social workers at somewhere. I can't remember where, but they were, and because they deal with families and people and parents and society, and they asked to talk to the 2 recovery coaches, right? And I said, look, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm not giving a presentation. I'm not doing PowerPoints. I'm not doing whiteboards. I'm not doing a presentation.
Yeah.
I will give you, I could talk for a half hour standing on my head.
Yep.
But I'll give you 10 minutes on who I am, my backstory, and what I do for work now. And the rest of the hour is Q&A. Because the minute you start pimping us out as experts, the whole program is screwed.
Yep.
Because I'm not. I'm not. I know what's worked for me so far.
Yeah.
Right? So am I an expert at sobriety? Well, by definition, an expert is anyone who's done something for 10,000 hours. Right?
Interesting.
So I guess I'm at least close to an expert.
Yeah, I don't do math, but sure.
And so do I have I have an expertise in staying sober for 12 years so far.
Yep.
Right? That's what I know how to do.
Yeah.
Right? And I do it my own way.
Yeah.
Right? That's not to say that I found my own way and I do it the way I want to and blah, blah, blah. It's stuff came to me when I needed it.
Right.
Right? My first sponsor he was a Hell's Angel prospect.
Yep.
He watches Fox News.
Yep.
He did 4 voluntary tours of Vietnam and shot 2 guys after he got sober.
Yep, just like you.
Tattoos and everything, right?
Yep.
I'm as liberal as they come.
Yep.
And, and this guy had when I met him, 35 years sober.
Yeah.
But he knew about again, I'm doing air quotes, the quote unquote disease of alcoholism.
Right.
Right? And he knew how to talk to me in a way that I started to understand. I don't want to say what was wrong with me.
Yeah.
But he changed my perspective. He got me to look at things differently.
Yep.
And all the people in those groups that I found were fairly miserable. But they were sober and they weren't miserable all the time, right? They were pretty good.
Yeah.
And you asked me earlier, do I still have that negative thinking? I would say something that I never thought I was going to say is that I'm pretty happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. My definition of happiness has had to change.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's a Western thing. Like Western culture I think we see happiness as joy and excitement and getting what you want. And happiness.
Minus the getting what you want, maybe. But go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, I think happiness, it's like being excited and getting what you want. That's kind of this culture's definition of happiness.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And my definition of happiness now is basically just I'm okay.
Yeah.
Right. And 80% of the time, by that definition, I'm happy.
Yeah.
I have bad days.
Yeah.
But it doesn't throw me like it did.
Right.
Right. It's not the end of the world.
Right.
Like everything was to the level of a nuclear disaster. Anything that happened.
Yeah, sure.
And today it's not.
Yep.
It's like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
And seeing that. And that's a result of staying sober, and meditation has a lot to do with that.
Yep.
Because I finally understood my thinking.
Yeah.
Right. And what it is what's going on. So that's the hard part to explain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And it's like the people that say I don't have time to meditate.
Oh, it just makes me want to slam my
head
against
and I look at them and I go, you don't have time not to.
One thing I noticed is making time for meditation makes time. Like literally, time doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating.
Have you ever read any of Shinzen Young?
I haven't read anything.
Okay, so Shinzen Young.
I'm not well read.
Shinzen Young. I could be completely getting this wrong, but he's a Buddhist monk who was studying math and physics, and he went to Japan and went to a monastery and ended up staying.
Yep.
And he wrote a book called The Science of Enlightenment. And he says that in his book. He says, if you meditate, your life will be longer.
Yeah.
Not in terms of you'll live to 120.
Life expectancy, right.
but the fulfillment and the stuff that happens and that you see every day, right?
Yeah.
And along with that comes this other theory. I tend to piece things together from all different kind of sources, right? So that whole idea of like life, you'll live longer.
Yeah.
Is as you get older, the days seem to fly by.
Yep.
And one of the reasons for that, and this is neurological, one of the reasons for that is that there's nothing new to us anymore, right? As you get older, you don't see anything new. Whereas when you're a little kid, remember how long summer used to be?
Right.
Because everything was new.
So exciting.
It was like, this is
the
amazing.
Innocence. Right.
I mean, we used to get to August when I was a kid, and it'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to get back to school.
Yeah.
This is too much, all this time.
Yeah.
You know, and now it's like, it's June 1st, and the next thing I know, it's August 30th.
Yep.
And what the hell just happened? I've been on my bike twice, right? And it's because we don't have that whole concept of beginner's mind that the Buddhists talk about, of like seeing everything new, like what you said before too, like who am I, right? That's also a Buddhist meditation. Who am I? I don't know, right? And there's also another one that, what is this? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know, right? What is this? I don't know. And you constantly repeat that. And then you take that with you in the world too. And then that enables you to see that my boss is calling me. She wants to see me. She's going to fire me. I know what this is about. I'm going to end up living in a trailer somewhere in North Carolina, you know, and not that there's anything wrong with that.
I was going to say, what's wrong with North Carolina?
And I lived there for 5 years. I can tell you a lot.
Stuff.
I can tell you a lot of it. There's some stuff. There's some stuff that's wrong with it. But that idea. And you start going, but I don't know that, right? I know this is going to, no, you don't.
Right.
She's going to, no, you don't know that.
Yeah.
Right. And then you start carrying that with other things too. Like, I don't know what this is going to be like. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know. I'm going to go find out. Right. And then it sounds really corny, but then it kind of becomes an adventure, right?
Yeah.
Like coming here, this is like one of the first shows that we've had a guest on.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm flipping out this morning.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be a travesty. It's going to be horrible. You know,
pipes are going to explode while we're sitting there on the mics.
Yeah. I don't know what she's going to say. I don't know what I'm going to ask her. And here we've been talking for like a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been really interesting. So that's the thing, is that you have no idea. And
that's what's fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Versus scary. Right.
And that's what meditation brings.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
And I think no matter what kind of meditation you're doing.
Yeah.
I talk to people who have done all different kinds of disciplines of meditation.
Yeah.
And at the base, it's the same.
Same stuff. Yeah.
I got to know myself.
Yeah.
I got to see what my thinking is like.
Yes.
And I got to be a little bit happier.
Yep.
Right. And that's why Dan Harris names
10%.
10% happier. Right.
Right.
And I would say a lot more than that.
I was going to say, yeah.
I would say
Same
a lot more than 10% happier. And it's not like I'm walking around. This is the thing, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of a funny story, because I'm going to speak for my anniversary tonight at this group that I used to go to.
Yep.
But when I started meditating, they all made fun of me.
Yep.
And the whole thing was like, you're not going to get this by oming out on a mountaintop and being one with the universe. And then they would follow it with, this is about sitting quietly and getting to know your disease. And I would go,
you're like, I think we just said the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now that we're on the same page, I bid you adieu. You know?
Well, Bill W. has some stories and some writings about. I know there's a piece, and I've like Googled the hell out of this because I know I've read it before, sitting in an AA meeting, either looking at a Grapevine issue or something, where he said something on the lines of AAs will never know the depth of their spirituality or something to do with that if they don't meditate.
Right.
It was like this real simple statement. And his spiritual experience, very similar to the cool breeze of Sahaja Yoga, is feeling a cool breeze rush through his body. You know, this experience about the mountaintop he talks about when he had it. Yeah.
Now, was that when he was on acid or no?
No, this is this is not when he was experimenting with psychedelics.
Because there's also that story.
Yeah, no, that's a different one. But he actually was, I was just reading it, and he was like rushing out to go, you know, like help everybody get sober by giving them the spiritual experience, and then realized he didn't know how to do it and he didn't know how to get it back. So he figured like, okay, there's got to be another way. And then, you know, sort of AA sort of grew from this. But yeah, it's really interesting.
I think Sandy B talked about that too.
Really?
About that same thing, that Bill W. because Sandy B was a big meditator.
Yeah.
A contemplative.
Okay.
He loves saying that. He
Yep.
goes, this whole conference is on
Yeah.
contemplative AA.
Okay, cool.
Because he knew that alcoholics would come in droves if
Yeah.
it sounded like something like that, right?
Right.
Oh, it's contemplative sobriety.
Right.
So, but some of the, like Thomas Merton, right, who was a Catholic priest. And also I think he comes up a lot in AA talk because I think there was some alcoholism somewhere in there, right?
Yeah.
And he was a contemplative priest. He was a monk,
Okay.
A Catholic monk, but a contemplative nonetheless. Walt Whitman was a contemplative, right?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of mystery behind contemplation, and that's essentially what meditation is, right?
Right,
It's not
right.
it's not shedding everything.
Yeah.
It's getting in touch with that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And then, and everything that comes with that too,
Right,
Like
right.
the dark nights of the soul and all that, but that's a conversation for a whole other time. Yeah.
No.
Well, there's supposedly the Buddhists at one time had mapped out these levels of insight and enlightenment, and the maps have been released
Okay.
and are floating around somewhere
Oh,
as to
interesting.
and that it happens. I compare a lot of like the levels of, and I don't mean this to sound the way it's going to sound, but like the levels of sobriety and the time that's in sobriety.
Yeah.
I compare that a lot to those levels of insight and attainment in meditation.
Oh,
Right?
it is. A thousandfold.
And what happens in these meditations
Yeah.
is that you get to a certain point and you think you've achieved something and you think you're there. And those are generally followed by what the Buddhists used to call the dark night of the soul.
Okay.
Right? Is that you're like, oh, well, I finally, and then you,
No. Right, because that's the ego, right? The ego kicks in.
right. And then,
you're like,
and then you,
"Ooh."
and a lot of times you can fall into a really deep depression.
Yes.
And what's interesting is, and you're familiar with William White.
Nope.
Okay, William White has done a lot of writing and advocating for recovery coaches and the recovery community ever since.
Bill. Oh my God!
Bill
Why
White.
am I
Yeah,
not
I'm
saying?
sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he had an article. I want to say it might have been written recently, or I came across it recently.
Yeah.
But and you were in AA. So the anecdotal stories of 3, 5, 7 years,
Yeah.
and what those mean, right? The first year, year 3, year 5,
Yep.
and all those kind of demarcations that everyone just kind of knowingly goes,
Yep.
oh well, yes, I remember that.
I remember you get your marbles back, and
Yeah,
then you do this.
yeah,
and-
exactly. And that they're, and then a group that I used to go to used to say, you come to, and you come to believe, and they're in 5-year increments, right? Well, Bill White had some actually proof in studies from England and Canada and the U.S.
Yep.
that there are clear areas
Stages.
of 1 year,
Right.
3 year, and 5
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
of those points of demarcation.
Yep.
And then he recently had one too. About 5 years is probably the one that marks the most stability in those 5 years, right?
Yeah,
Now it's not 5 years exactly. It's
No.
not like I got to January 29th.
Right, and I was good to go.
2012,
I've been riding the wave ever since.
Exactly. Yeah. Riding the rainbow, and so that those have been mapped out, and I find that fascinating only because you hear it in meetings and it's anecdotal, and then you see it actually get backed up by studies.
Yeah.
And you go, oh,
And then you live it.
Right.
Which is,
right.
I mean, absolutely. And I remember going through the recovery coaching classes, and they talked about the stages of recovery, which came from William White. And that was the first time I ever heard it. And I identified 100% because it's like exactly what happened to me. Because what happened to me at this crossroads of coming up on 15 years clean, which whatever, like the number, but did I ever think, 5 years before that, 10 years before that I would hit 15 years clean and all of a sudden have this complete transformation happen because of running into like some sort of obstacle in my recovery, right? I never would have thought that. I never would have thought in a million years that I would slow down to a point of not going to meetings anymore and be completely okay with that, right? Not in a million years. So like they do know what they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I know. It's hard to believe.
Well, I never believe anybody till I actually experience it, right?
Well, and the thing is, too, is I'm sure exactly. I'm sure you're finding this, too, is the stuff that you learned in school, right? You also find it in meditation and spiritual guidances and literature and things like that, right? It's like you can easily...
School, I don't know. In the Recovery Coach Academy, yeah.
Oh, I find, well, I mean, I think...
they taught a lot about... Well, go ahead. What were you thinking?
Well, I want like revolutionary new therapies, right? CBT.
I'm like,
but all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing new. It's stuff that's been around for thousands of years.
Yeah, yeah.
And you slap a new label on it, and you go, "This is going to revolutionize our
and
industry."
You're like, "Wait, we've been doing this."
And it's like, well, they were doing they were doing this in ancient Rome in 500 BC.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I'll get into these arguments with people, and I'll say, all this stuff in AA, it's nothing new. You guys have just kind of collected it all into one place, which is great.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the library of sobriety.
Yep.
Right? And you can kind of pick any book you want.
Yep.
But it's like, I got into my former sponsor, got into a debate with him about it. And he goes, no, we came up with this and God gave it to AA. And I'm like, really? Let me read you a couple paragraphs of it. Right?
They knew something about this before.
And I read him a Stoic philosopher, Epictetus, or Epictetus, I never know, but Epictetus, who was a Stoic philosopher. And I read him the first, and it was 500 BC. He was a former slave and became a Stoic philosopher.
Yeah.
And I read him the first couple of paragraphs out of the first chapter of this book, right? And I don't have it in front of me, but I finished reading them, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I go, kind of sounds like the Serenity Prayer, doesn't it?
Yep.
And it's that exact same thing, right?
Yeah.
And for me, sobriety has been that. It's been 80% of it has been accept the things I cannot change, right?
Yep.
And get the F out of the way, right? It's like it's not going to happen the way you want it to.
Yeah.
It might happen the way you'd like, but it's not going to happen the way you, and then just being able to relax and be okay and not have to control everything and not run around like a madman.
Right.
I have so much free time, which isn't really free time, but I'm doing what I want to do.
100%.
Right?
Absolutely.
I'm working in a job that I like.
So fun. Yeah.
I'm enjoying myself. I'm doing this podcast.
Yep.
I've got the website.
Yep.
And I have fun.
Yep.
Because I enjoy my life today.
Yeah. One thing I realized, like you talked about obstacles and all these things and getting out of our way. And what I learned in meditation that they didn't teach us in AA, right, is like those like negative thoughts or feelings or any of that kind of stuff that comes up is really understanding that's something outside myself. That's not me, right? So never identifying with whatever that thought is or whatever that fear or any negativity. And even the woman that was teaching the meditation said there's always going to be some negativity or obstacle that's going to try and stop you from doing something to help you grow or stop you from even coming to the meditation, right? So just being so hyper aware of that, and anytime like those thoughts or feelings or any of that stuff come in, I'm just like, that's not me. I'm the spirit.
Right.
Right.
And that was the kind of groups that I found too.
Yeah.
And they used to refer to it as going against your disease.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. You can label it as the disease. You can label it, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
But then this whole thing too in Buddhism, that there are the causes and conditions of suffering. One of them being self.
Yeah.
Right. A sense of self. But there's this concept of self, right? That it essentially doesn't exist, but that the only way to find that there is no self is to go look for it and not find it, right? That's the whole. That's the.
And the other thing there's like two, right? Like when you hear people say, I hate myself or I can't stand myself, like, wait a minute, then who's the I and who's the self and which one is really you?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets
like,
confusing, right? So that's one of the more esoteric kind of paradoxical views of what it is, what the suffering leads to. And what's interesting is that all of those causes and conditions that lead to suffering, that addicts and alcoholics are uniquely capable of understanding and identifying with. Because it's things like impermanence and craving and delusion, unsatisfactoriness, right? And a sense of self. And that we are basically consciousness, right? That our field of vision doesn't stop when we close our eyes. There's still a field of vision there. So who's seeing it? Right? That's the the big one, and that's where that whole idea of that there is no self and ego and all that.
The thing that drives me crazy, and the thing that I was trying to help, if I am doing any counseling, is just having people be able to separate that from themselves, like knowing that instinctively and truly believing it. Now I can tell you about it, right? So that's what really helps with the meditation and then doing the counseling, because now coming with some conviction versus I'm just like, oh, I read this stuff and it sounds good, so I'm going to tell you about it. I can't.
Right.
It's just impossible for me to be able to do that.
I have a guy in my group that is convinced that he's in complete control of his own thoughts.
Yeah.
And we got into it.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, you're not. They kind of manifest out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You don't have any control over them.
Right.
And I just listened to this whole thing like a week before with Sam Harris.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And there were like 12 people in the room. I said, everyone, close your eyes.
Yep.
We're going to do this for a minute. Mm-hmm. You can think of anything you want.
Yeah.
Except polar bears.
Yep. Right. The pink elephant. Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so how'd that go?
Yep. How'd you do?
How much control did you have over that?
Right, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And he still wanted to argue with me.
Yeah, of
I'm like,
course.
are you saying
Well,
you didn't think of polar bears? He goes, not at all.
Yep.
I'm like, you're a liar.
Then you've mastered this. Thank you.
Exactly.
You don't have to come back.
Exactly. You may leave. I'll give you your graduation
As
notice.
he walks on the air, floats out of the room. That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's good
All
stuff.
right. Well, we've been talking for a while there,
Wow.
Michelle.
Hope we didn't bore everybody.
Michelle Simons, right?
Ah, you got it.
There we go.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Simmons is 2 M's.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it happens. We're not all perfect.
It's not like I read. So, I did want to, but we'll do this for another show. I did want to talk to you about, the recovery center plans in Lynn. And I think we'll leave that for another time.
Sure.
And some. Oh, I know. I did want to ask you one. I have 2 questions for you. Is one, and I know the answer to this, but I want it to be recorded. Do you think? Actually, I don't know what your answer is going to be.
Okay.
Do you think in a field like recovery coaching or addiction therapy, do you think someone has to be in recovery for that?
No.
In order to be effective?
No.
Really?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No. Do you want to know why?
Yeah, of course.
What I realized early on, so being in recovery myself, which I mentioned a bunch of times, in the halfway house that I was in, that when I got clean this time, there was a woman there. She was one of the counselors there, and she was a minister at a Pentecostal church. She had never done a drop of alcohol, cigarettes, or any drugs in her entire life. She's from Barbados. Most soulful, beautiful woman I had ever met. And I think, so she ran most of the groups, and I had some of the most transformational moments in her groups. And she catapulted me into this sort of seeking of spirituality. So I didn't go that direction, obviously, but many, many conversations about spirituality with her. And so, yeah, no. And I also believe that if you have a person that has gone through life and never had to use a drug or a substance or alcohol or anything to get through life, then they have some information to share with us about that and how the hell to do it, right? So yeah, so because I've personally experienced getting some help from people that aren't in recovery, I'm going to say yeah, they don't have to be.
Well, that last part was interesting, was that they've gotten through life without it, and but that gets into a whole discussion about, well, did they need it the way that I did?
Right.
In order to get through life,
yep.
Right, and
yep.
that's probably another hour's worth of conversation. So I'm going to ask you my next question, which I want to try to ask everyone. Is there anything that you wish I had asked you that I didn't?
Not that I can think of. No.
Okay.
No.
Is there any point you'd like to make, or
nope.
Speech?
No.
Soapbox?
Got nothing.
No. Got no soapbox.
Nope.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks.
This was great. This was a lot of fun.
It was good.
Okay, we're back. That was Michelle Simons. Steve?
Wow, I clearly need to do more in my life, meditation-wise. My God. You know, she touched on a lot of important concepts that most people that I've talked to have learned in AA, and I've always been of the belief, and I've come to this conclusion after many years of suffering, that you got to give this stuff away to keep it. And this idea that we can just go to as many meetings as possible, and service commitments and doing all these things doesn't, for the most part, I know for me, it never really brought me any joy because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I always had my ego in mind first and how I'm looking to other people, instead of growing closer to a spiritual solution. So I liked what she had to talk about. What do you remember the name of the type of yoga that she does?
I don't. I'm going to put a link up on the blog post.
Right.
Though.
So, you know, and really through that, you know, I sort of had a realization that, you know, who am I to say things about chakras and energy, and, you know, like, who cares? If it works for them, so be it. Good for them.
Well, and here's the thing too, because you mentioned that too, and she and I talked about it during the interview too. Is this whole idea of giving it away, right? And I think a lot of the stuff that you hear in AA comes from, and I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of people say things because they've heard it before, and they repeat it.
Most of it is repeated,
and they say the same thing without actually knowing what they're talking about, what the underlying effects and stuff behind that is, right? So one of the things she and I talked about was this whole idea of cultivating compassion, right? That you can cultivate compassion with meditation, and that there's actually there's an institute called, you know, as hokey as it sounds, the Compassion Institute, that is it's run by the Dalai Lama's English translator, and they're studying cultivating compassion with physicians, right? Because they're studying compassion, what's called compassion fatigue,
right.
Physician burnout, right? And that actually compassion fatigue is basically misnamed, that it should more be named discompassion fatigue, because what they're finding is that physicians are in fact trained to some degree to disassociate and disengage from their patients, and that's what's causing the physician burnout. Right? Whereas when you cultivate compassion, you generate joy, and that joy motivates you to do more. So this whole idea of giving it away, right? When you first get into AA and first start talking about that, it feels like I'm going to have to do all this work just to stay sober. But once you're sober for a long time, you get something for yourself, and you want other people to experience that. And that's what Michelle and I were talking about with the Sandy B thing, right? Is that you continue to do this because it makes you feel good. Right? So it's like, I don't go to meetings necessarily to stay sober anymore, although it helps, right? I think it does. I don't know. But I also go because I like to see other people getting what I feel that I've gotten. And that's kind of what Michelle was talking about too. What was interesting during that interview was she said something, because I was talking about my own negative thinking. And this is where the whole idea of communication comes in, right? Is I said, yeah, I have negative thinking. And she said, still? Like that, right? Like she was kind of surprised that at 12 years I still had negative thinking. And I was thinking about that. And then, of course, when I was editing when I was doing the edits on the interview, it came up again. And it's something I'd been thinking about this entire time. And then earlier that day, I had talked to some kid in AA who had a couple years sober, and he was just angry. And I was telling him, I'm like, yeah, you're angry because that's what you know, right? You're comfortable there. It's an area in which you're comfortable, because he didn't even know what he was angry about. He just knew he was angry. And I went to bed that night after having had that conversation, after having edited Michelle's interview. And I was about to fall asleep, and that came up again. It's like, are you really still? And I was like, no. Right? It's like those negative thoughts are still kind of there. Like I know where to find them if I want them, right? But it's not. It's like I fell into that same kind of thing that I was telling this kid about, right? My negative thoughts are my identity. They're who I think I am. They're what I identify with and what I like to talk about, and it's comfortable for me. But are they really there? Am I really still as negative as I used to be? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it took that conversation to kind of make me realize that. So, I had my own little awakening during.
Wow.
Yeah, right? Nice. Yeah. So, if this podcast is helping no one at the
very least, it helped you.
At the very least, it helped me. So, again, we've taken up a perfectly good hour of your time.
More than that.
A little more than that. It's been a little more than that. So thanks for listening. And again, subscribe to us on iTunes, rate us on iTunes, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Again, this is Richard Zombek and Steve Lesnikowski, and we are Buds with Suds.